Hello, and welcome to the Empress Cemetery in the land of the living skies, Saskatchewan. I'm going to tell you a little about the people buried here in the Veterans section. First, we have an unknown grave. There is no record of any burial here, so I don't know if anyone is buried here or not. It occurred to me that it might be a dedication to the unknown soldier. Here is Donald Robertson Jr., who served in World War I. He was born in Ontario and came to Alberta, where he married his first wife and homesteaded in the Rocky Mountain House area. They had 2 daughters before he gave up on his homestead because it was poor quality. Then his wife died in childbirth in 1914. He joined up in 1916, leaving his daughters with his brother John and his family in Calgary. In England he was assigned to the engineers, then married his second wife there in January 1918. He arrived in France in March 1918 and served in the field with the 11th Battalion of Canadian Engineers. He returned to England in April 1919 and back to Canada that August. He, his second wife, and his 2 daughters from his first wife lived in the village of Empress, and 3 sons were born to them before Donald died from kidney disease on June 24, 1925. He was a month shy of his 47th birthday. The Canadian military said his death was due to his service. Now we have Edward Johnstone Connor, Eddie, World War I. He was born in Scotland and was living alone in Empress for the June 1916 census. He had his medical exam for the military in November 1917 and signed up in April 1918. He arrived in England the next month and France on October 30th, 1918, then arrived at his unit in the field on November 14th. 3 days after the war ended. He was sent back to England in February 1919 and back to Canada the next month, going back to Empress. A few months later, on August 1st, 1919, he earned himself a Darwin Award for dying in a stupid way. He was hired by Mr. Kenny to lay a drain pipe from his residence to a cesspool at the rear of the house. Eddie asked to work alone because he needed the money. The dirt of the trench he was digging was wet and collapsed twice. After the first time, Mrs. Kenny said to Eddie that he should get some planking from the basement to brace the trench, but Eddie said he didn't need it. She watched him for a while, then went to make lunch. It collapsed a second time when no one else was around, burying Eddie alive. They dug him up to rebury him here in the cemetery. He was 24 years old. Next is Melvin Clifford Tarr, World War II. He was born in North Dakota and was 15 years old when his father died in March 1919. His mother brought her 3 children to Canada a few months later on July 31st. I couldn't find them in the 1921 census, but for the June 1926 census, they were all living in Empress. All I know about his military service is what is here on his headstone, that he was a private in the medical corps and presumably served in World War II. He married while in England. After the war, he was on U.S. muster rolls in San Francisco in 1947 and 1948. From 1949 until his death, he and his wife lived in Empress, and he was an agent for an implement or machine company. I found no information about any children. He died in Empress on November 13, 1962, at the age of 58. Now we have Olaus Louis Brakke, World War I. The Royal Canadian Legion made 2 mistakes with this marker. For some reason they put Allen instead of Olaus. In all records, census, homestead, military, and voter, he was always Olaus. They also transposed the digits for the day of his death. Olaus was born in Minnesota and came to Canada in 1912 at the age of 32, homesteading just north of here near Acadia Valley. He joined the military in February 1916 and arrived in England in October. Unfortunately, he developed sciatica during the crossing, and in December a medical board deemed him fit only for permanent base duty. In February 1917, he arrived in France for the 1st Canadian Infantry Works Battalion. By July 1918, his sciatica was bad enough that he spent a few weeks in the base hospital, then in a hospital back in England for 4 months. At the end of October, just before the end of the war, he was transferred to temporary base duty because of his health problems. After the war ended, he was sent back to Canada and discharged from military service as medically unfit in February 1919. His health problems were bad enough that he never worked his homestead again, abandoning it. He made a statutory declaration for his homestead in 1921, stating that he could not work and was living off his army pension of $11.25 per month. He lived in the Empress area until his death on February 21st, 1943. He was 63 and had never married. Next is James Richard Fenessey, who served in the Canadian military during World War I, but not actually in the war. He was born in Quebec, and his mother died when he was 16 months old. His father remarried, and James can be seen in the 1901 census with his family in Quebec. He had his military medical exam in Calgary in November 1917, and in April 1918 joined up in Calgary. He arrived in England in August and waited in Bramshot in the reserves. He was still there when the war ended, November 11, 1918. Like many Canadian soldiers immediately after the end of the war, he was transferred to Rhyl, Wales in January 1919. Also, like many soldiers who were forced to wait at Rhyl for months doing nothing, he got in trouble, going absent without leave twice. He finally arrived back in Canada in July 1919 and was discharged from service. In April 1920, he homesteaded just across the Saskatchewan border, 15 kilometers north-northeast of Empress. He died in the Empress Hospital on April 10, 1925, at the age of 39, from what was described as pernicious anemia. Now we have Dr. John M. Fraser, who served as a surgeon and physician with the UK military during World War II. His experience during the war meant that he could deal with trauma and remain calm under the most extreme pressure. He was born, married, and had his son in Scotland. The family came to Canada sometime between 1951 and 1957. They lived in Etonia, Saskatchewan until January 1962, when he became the doctor in Empress. He continued as eye doctor until he died on June 8, 1978, at the age of 61. Next is Thomas Lewis Ross, who served with the Canadian military, presumably during World War II. I haven't found any military records for him, so all we know about it is what is on his headstone here. RCEME, Royal Canadian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. Thomas was born in North Dakota, and his family arrived in Canada in 1908 when he was a 1-year-old. From then until the 1926 census, he and his family lived just south of Tompkins, Saskatchewan. Then the family was living in Regina for the 1931 census. People on the Ancestry website say he was married, but I haven't found any evidence of that. In every voter's list I found his name, he is listed as being alone. Tom Ross is not exactly an original name, so it's difficult to know if our Tom Ross is the same one as I found in voters' lists elsewhere other than Empress. For Empress, voters' lists show him here from 1962 to 1979, working as a laborer. Thomas died November 11, 1980, probably in Empress, at the age of 73. The last grave in the veterans section is Charles P. Robertson. We see from his headstone that he lived from 1912 to 1983. If he served, it would have been in World War II. Unfortunately, the only other information I found for him is that he appears in the 1979 voters list for Empress. Right after his name is an Olinda Robinson, which we might assume was his wife. That's all I know about him. The next one is not in the veterans section because he died before that section was created. It's a cenotaph, meaning a monument for someone who was not buried here. His name was William Selden Lane, and he went by Joe. He served and died in World War I and is buried in France. Joe was born in Manitoba in 1884. He was 22 in 1907 when he homesteaded next to Last Mountain Lake in Saskatchewan, about 79 kilometers northwest of Regina. 4 years later, he was granted a patent on that land. Then in 1913, he helped his father, Newton, homestead in Social Plains, which is about 25 kilometers south of Bindloss, Alberta. In March 1916, Joe was a barber in Empress when he went down to Medicine Hat and enlisted in the Canadian military at the age of 31. He was assigned to the 175th Battalion Canadian Infantry and arrived in England that October. After training in England, he joined his unit with the 50th Battalion Canadian Infantry in France on April 30th, 1917. He was wounded in action and died in the ambulance on June 20th, 1917. He was 32 years old. His father Newton died 5 years later in 1923 and is buried beside his son's cenotaph, but he never got a headstone. The small white rebar cross we see marking his grave was added about the year 2000. I took that video on October 17th, and since then, a headstone was put out for someone that I've learned was a veteran of World War II. Plus, I forgot to include another veteran who didn't serve in war. This further video is from November 4th. Edward Allen Patey, who went by Allen, was born in BC, and the family was living in Lethbridge for the 1926 census when he was 2 years old. In 1940, Allen was 16 years old and lied about his age when he joined the Navy. He served on the Royal Navy ship HMS Nigeria for the duration of the war, traveling to various Asian locations and north of the Arctic Circle, becoming a steam engineer in the process. After the war, he went back to Lethbridge and became a sign painter like his father. He married in 1962 and thereafter lived in Calgary, then eventually Medicine Hat. He died in Medicine Hat on May 30th, 2013 at the age of 89. The last one I will show you is Ernest G. Vincent. He served in the Canadian military, but not in war. I haven't done research on him yet, but from his headstone we can see that he was a Master Corporal serving in the Royal Canadian Regiment, who was awarded the Canadian Forces Decoration for Long Service, a minimum of 12 years. Well, that's it for this video of the military veterans in the Empress Cemetery. There may be more veterans here than I've shown you, but I don't know about them yet, because I haven't done research on everyone in the cemetery yet. Now, I invite you to watch my short video, Empress Cemetery 360 Degree Pan, which I recorded at this point.